Welcome to How I Raised It, the podcast that goes behind the scenes with entrepreneurs who've raised capital. We uncover the tips, tricks, and techniques they use to get investors to write a check. Strap in and turn it up.
Hi, welcome to another episode of How I Raised It, produced by foundersuite.com. Today I have Chris Molaro of Neuroflow coming to us from Philly. How's it going in Philly today?
Thanks for having me. It's going great here. Weather's nice outside, and we got to go for a walk this morning, so it was nice.
Yeah, I was just saying I've never been to Philly. I don't know why. It's not been premeditated, not avoiding Philly, but I've just never had the reason to go there. I'd love to check it out sometime. Are you a native Philadelphian or what?
No, I'm actually from New York originally, but I moved here for graduate school when I went to Wharton for my MBA, and we stayed ever since.
Cool. What's your favorite part about the city? That's a very open question.
It has a surprisingly, I think, and I say surprisingly because it's in such close proximity to New York City, but the food scene here is really great. And it has a lot of BYOB restaurants. So you get to, enjoy these little, local restaurants that are not chains and bring a nice bottle of wine or something with you, which is great. It's great pre-COVID, and then in COVID era, they've all moved to outdoor seating, which is interesting.
Yeah. So what are they going to do when winter hits? Like you have real winter. In California, we don't really have winter, sort of, but what are you going to do?
That is true. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's area heaters. I think we're taking it one step at a time at this point. I don't know.
Are you seeing like little tents popping up, or, are they going to build little plastic greenhouse?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think it's relevant to the conversation we're going to have is that from a pure like academic perspective, I think it's been very interesting to see the survival mentality of people and businesses, no matter what's thrown at them. I mean, COVID, no one expected this to happen. And because businesses need to survive, they adapt and they overcome, in places that normally never had outdoor seating, bought the right to like 5 parking spots in a parking lot next door so that they could have outdoor seating. And everywhere in Philly feels like a European city now because everywhere has outdoor sidewalk seating. And it's just it's very interesting. And, one might even say inspiring to see the transformation happen the way it has and the will to survive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was reading an article yesterday about a restaurant in New Orleans that pivoted to doing take-home meals, right? So not just take-home meals, cook yourself meals. So packaged meal kits, basically. Mm-hmm. But they also included like a Spotify playlist. So I love this idea. It was like selling this whole concept. You're going to take this Cajun meal kit home. You're going to put on this playlist and make it like, it's selling a whole experience, which I thought was very clever.
That is cool. Wow. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's get into what you guys do. What is Neuroflow?
So we're a technology company, first and foremost, and we partner with healthcare providers and systems so that they can help patients treat their whole selves. In other words, we know behavioral health and mental health affect the physical health outcomes of patients. It's just a matter of fact. It's proven at this point. But far too many times, mental health isn't accounted for in primary care or pain management, oncology, OBGYN. And we help those providers integrate behavioral health assessments, identification, and then treatment planning so that they don't have to have that burden on them. They can do it in a more efficient manner, and ultimately getting the patients better faster. So we layer right on top of their electronic health records and we have AI algorithm that identifies patients proactively using data. And then based on clinical guidelines, we'll make recommendations that, Nathan scored moderate on the depression score, so he should go see X provider in the system, where Chris scored severe, and that's an increase from moderate last month. He should see a psychiatrist or, make those types of recommendations.
So that makes sense. What is under the umbrella of behavioral health? Depression would be one. What else is sort of the list?
Yeah, I mean, it's really everything. It's your behavior and how you access and engage in your care. So it's not just diagnosable considerations like we would be familiar with: depression, PTSD, anxiety, and then the phobias and the postpartum depression, sleep disorders. Depending on who you speak to, people would put substance use disorder and addiction underneath the behavioral and mental health category. And then, but like I was mentioning, far too many times there's a behavioral component to someone's physical health. And that's where that intersection is where we specialize in. So if somebody is in chronic pain every day and is on opioid medications, just statistically, there's a very good chance that they also have an element of depression or anxiety that they're struggling with, which kind of makes a lot of sense. But that behavioral component of that health goes unnoticed and not treated and not managed far too often.
Okay. Give me a really simple, probably dumbed down user journey on this, or customer journey. So, a patient or customer, I don't know what you refer to them as, comes on. What are they doing? What's sort of the activities that they're engaging in?
So it'd be so I'll start from what happens today normally, because it's much easier, I think, to describe it that way. I'll go in to see my primary care provider for like my annual wellness visit, right? And they hopefully, in a lot of cases, they're moving in this direction, which is a good thing, but they hopefully do a depression screening. And you may not even know that they're doing a depression screening. It might be they ask you a few questions. If you remember, they ask you like, do you drink or smoke? And if you say, yeah, I drink a beer now and again, they say, do you have 2 or 3 beers a week? And you're answering those questions. They say, have you had trouble sleeping in the last 2 weeks? Have you had thoughts of harming yourself? Those are all questions from the patient health assessments and questionnaires known as the PHQ-9 and the GAD-7. Based on those scores, they'll put them in the electronic health record. And if you score positively on them, they'll make some sort of treatment referral to you. That could be, most of the time it's, here's a referral to a therapist or a referral to a psychiatrist. Depending on the PCP, they might write you an antidepressant. And then you leave and you go about your life, and you'll see the doctor again when it's your next year's annual wellness visit. And that's the way today happens. And what we know is that of the 50 million people in this country that have a behavioral health condition, diagnosable condition, the vast majority, like upwards of 60 to 70% of people, never actually access and engage in their treatment. They won't go to that therapist, or they won't take their antidepressant. Might be because they don't like the side effects, or the availability is tough, or the insurance doesn't cover it. For whatever reason, we know that 2/3 to 3/4 of patients don't access their behavioral health care. And yet no one's tracking outcomes or understanding if things get worse and whatnot. And that's the way things happen today. So with Neuroflow, instead of giving the PHQ-9 just verbally and then putting it in and making a recommendation, you'll do that assessment in the technology. On the patient side of things, that's in an app or a text message or on the web. That data is automatically scored and sent back to the provider's workflow in the EHR. We score it. We compare it against the rest of their population, so it's relative to the rest of the population that's similar to me. And then we present that primary care provider the appropriate level of care recommendation. Not it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. So Nathan may need a psychiatrist, Chris might need a therapist, Alice down the street, she just might need some self-help mindfulness meditation exercises. And so we could get the right people to the right level of care at the right time. And then last, we have patient engagement tools that provide resources in a 24/7 mentality where they can access emergency lines, self-help activities, journaling activities, all in between their appointment, which sends that feedback of how things are progressing back to the doctors. And that's kind of the care continuum loop that we call it.
Who's who pays in this whole scenario? Is the patient, the insurance, the doctor's office, or what?
So it's never the patient. The patient doesn't pay anything. It's our customer is the health system or the health insurance company, depending on the situation. In fact, it's the opposite. The patients earn rewards for going in the platform and doing their activities, and those rewards are redeemable for like gift cards and things like that. So we've gamified the system in hopes of nudging positive behavior change
Sure.
so that patients get involved with their care more.
What, since COVID hit February, March, whatever you want to start the timeline, what's been the biggest spike in, I don't know, do you have any interesting data points of like what's spiked depression or anxiety probably, or something else, or any most surprising little data thing that you've encountered or observed?
Yeah. First of all, yes. I mean, COVID has, I think, uncovered a lot of interesting things from a healthcare and IT perspective. If there's ever a bright side to the pandemic, it is it's forced healthcare systems that are normally really slow to change to have to innovate and adopt in fast and quick order to remain relevant and continue to be able to treat their patients effectively. And I don't think that you're going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle post-COVID.
Yeah.
So from Neuroflow's perspective, even without COVID, we've grown a lot in the last year. We're in kind of a fast growth stage of our life. We went from 20,000 patients on the platform last year to now over 250,000, 250,000. And in the course of from March to April, that first really pinnacle month of COVID, we saw more than double the people in the platform access the emergency mental health resources in the application, which is concerning in one regard, but actually really, I think, hopeful in another regard, that people were recognizing that they needed help and then accessing that help, as opposed to, being in denial that they needed some extra level of help or not having access to those resources. So it was really cool to see that they reached out and did that. And then in terms of, we recently worked with a health system partner for some data analysis, and we showed people that had behavioral health issues that were not on Neuroflow had a 50% increase in ER utilization during COVID, meaning that they felt they needed in-person care. They didn't want to do telehealth, so they just went to the ER. Of those patients that had behavioral health issues that were using remote technology, in this case Neuroflow, ER utilization decreased 35%. So you had an increase of 50% on one side and a decrease of 35% on the other side, which is pretty compelling.
What were you doing? What was the genesis of this idea? Did you come from the healthcare side, or where did you come up with this?
I'm as far from healthcare as they come, Nathan. I don't have a healthcare background other than being a patient. Before getting into healthcare, I was in the Army for 9 years. So I was a captain in the Army Field Artillery. I went to West Point for my undergrad. And at 22 years old, I found myself as a lieutenant being a platoon leader. So I deployed overseas in 2010 and 11 to Iraq. And we did a year-long tour there. And when we came back home, we all get screened for depression and PTSD. It's kind of standard place. It was no surprise that was happening. We had one soldier that screened positively for sleep issues and PTSD. We all had sleep issues. That wasn't rare. And he was also being treated for some physical health conditions. And because he screened positively on those assessments, he was referred to a therapist and a psychiatrist. And we didn't know it at the time, but he was a statistic. He was one of the 2/3 of the patients that had behavioral health issues that don't actually engage and seek out the care they need. And tragically, we lost him to his battle with depression. And that, really hit our unit pretty hard. It hit me hard. And the most frustrating part is that the gap in care was, if we really looked at it, it was right there in front of us. No one ever followed up with him to say, hey, that referral, how's that going? No one did measurement-based care to see are his outcomes improving or not improving? And I think, I don't know if the situation would have changed for sure, but I think we would have stood a better chance to intervene. And then when you look at the statistics, again, that's really more of the rule than the exception. And so Neuroflow's genesis comes from the theory that you're never going to replace humans, at least not in my lifetime. You're not going to replace humans in the healthcare world, especially in something as nuanced as mental health. Uh-huh. But technology can certainly supercharge them and enhance the way that humans are able to reach out and do their job. And that's what our goal is.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about raising money for this. How much have you guys raised and over how many rounds?
We've raised just shy of $12 million over 3 rounds. We raised $1.25 million in a pre-seed round, and then $2.25 million in a seed round, and $7.5 million in a Series A round.
Let's go back to the pre-seed round. So, talk about raising that. Did you have a product at that point? I mean, what you're doing is pretty complex, and you're dealing with probably very long sales cycles and challenging market to sell into. And I'm sure it's all kinds of hairy. So maybe talk about those early days. What did you have? What were you raising? How'd you identify investors willing to play at the pre-seed?
Oh man, you're going to bring
trauma.
Yeah, not good memories in this case. This was a long journey for sure. I was actually in my second year of business school when we were fundraising, so I kind of had we definitely had a line in the sand because I was graduating in May, and then we had a few interns that were working for us that we told not to recruit at other jobs to work for us full time, because by the end of the summer we would have the money raised to be able to pay them, more than minimum wage at least. So, and maybe they're crazy too, but they trusted us. So that was back in 2017. And rewind, we didn't have a commercialized product. We had a working alpha, if you want to call it that. It was like pre-beta. But I think it did enough to demonstrate what we actually were trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. And we had early adopters that were in small private clinics that can move a lot faster than large hospitals. So we were not working with these big health systems at first. We were working with the private psychologist down the street that you would meet at a coffee shop sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And we got them to say this is needed. And I think the combination of that, the pre-beta working prototype, and my personal story and the strengths that myself and my co-founder had in complementing each other, and his background and my background, were enough to get investors saying, you certainly don't have it all figured out right now, but I think that you're going to figure it out. But those investors, it took us I still have the list today, 141 investors turned us down. Mm-hmm. And can't say I was upset at the time, but we tried to learn something from every one of those, rejections. And actually a few of those rejections came back and invested later on. Mm-hmm. But it was a long road. It was a slog. And eventually we were targeting $1 million. And it's one of those things where you pick up momentum and the dominoes start to fall. And then before you know it, we oversubscribed. We raised 1.25, almost to the T of when I said by the end of the summer, the first week of September. So 3 years ago to the week, we closed the first round.
Your story, I was also in business school trying to start a clinical trial software startup, also trying to fundraise a little bit, but my thing failed. So good for you. I like hearing this sort of parallel universe, but it worked out for you. It is not out of the water yet. A lot of things can go wrong still. Interesting. So did someone lead that round, or was it a party round, or,
So in business, and a lot of my professors and mentors at the time were saying, look, you're never going to be able to raise an investor round at this time because you don't have enough traction. You don't have enough proof points. What you need to do is raise a family and friends round first. Mm-hmm. And my co-founder and I, Adam, we looked at each other, we go who has family and friends that can write them these size checks? We both come from fairly humble backgrounds where my dad, bless him, he was like, Bud, look, I could write you $1,000 check. I believe in you. And I'm like, I need one, a lot more than that. And two, I don't want to take your $1,000. So we, eventually we found enough angels that were willing to kind of take a risk on us. And there was one in particular who was chairman of the New Jersey Jumpstart Angel Group. And he also just turns out to be a fellow Army veteran as well from the Vietnam era. And so we kind of clicked on that. And I owe him a debt of gratitude because he believed in us enough to get us off the ground. And he's still on our board today. And he is a big mentor of mine. And kind of when he initially committed to the term sheet, to committing the initial investment, a lot of his friends and colleagues stepped in as well. And again, it took us like 9 months to get him, and then it took us 2 months to get the rest, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. What's his name? We'll just give him a shout out. You might as well. I mean, unless
yeah, for sure. So he's on our website at neuroflow.com. Wayne Tamarelli is a a mentor of mine, an advisor to the company, and a longtime startup investor.
What was it? I think that's interesting. Kind of 9 months to get him, and then 2 months to get everyone else. That seems to often be how it is, right?
Right.
Like the 80-20 rule. It's 80% to get that lead investor, then 20 to fill out. What finally got him to tip? Any, I know we're going back a few years, but like, what was it? How did you convince him in the end?
Well, I don't want to speak for him in particular, but I think what we did a really good job of at that time was explaining the overwhelming need in the marketplace for mental health technologies, and it being kind of the Wild West in terms of the market. There was no clear winner. There was very disparate. It was a huge multi-billion-dollar problem that didn't really have a solution yet. But policies were shifting. Insurance companies were starting to pay for stuff like this. So the things seemed to be trending in the direction that would make it very positive. I think that plus our vision on how we were going to tackle it, that we never sought out to be the consumer tool. So anybody listening to your show, you could find Neuroflow on the App Store, but you won't be able to access it without a code that is generated through a health system or payer. So we're not a direct consumer tool, which is a lot different than a lot of the other apps out there. So I think he liked that model. And then I think he saw something in Adam and I as a founding team, and mine and his similar background being veterans. I think he said that, what he would like to say sometimes is, I bet on the horse and the jockey, so to speak. And looking back on it, I almost questioned like his judgment call on investing in us with how early on we were, but
Yeah, that's good. Very interesting. I see on the cap table actually too, I was kind of curious about, I think I saw something about South by Southwest Accelerator. Was that a competition, or did you go through a program there at South by?
Yeah, I think that's on like Crunchbase or PitchBook or something, right? That's listed. Yeah, I don't know why that's listed on there because they're not an investor on the cap table, but we did win the South by Southwest Accelerator in 2017. That was even before, that's a funny story. So before we even raised the investment round, this is March of 2017, we had one software engineer on the team. There's four of us. There's me, Adam, Sam DeLucia, who's employee number one. He's still at the company today. And another software engineer who I won't name to share, save him the embarrassment, but he was building the product for us, and we're pitching at the South by Southwest Accelerator competition. And the auditorium was filled, maybe 1,200 people. They were Facebook live streaming it. And I had what I thought was the brilliant idea to do a live stream demo of my stress level by reading my heart rate while presenting.
Wow.
And now that sounds like a cool idea, but I'll remind you, we didn't have we've never done that before. We didn't have a working product yet. So the team worked like 4 full all-nighters in a row to try to get this demo up and running. The morning of the pitch is on Saturday at like 3 p.m. and it's 8 a.m. and we're on the phone together and we're like, do we do it? Do we not do it? Did you get it to work? And he says, yeah, I've gotten it to work, but it keeps crashing and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, well, let's take a vote. And Sam was out for some reason. So it was, I voted yes, Adam voted no. And then the engineer was like, yes, let's do it. So I said, okay, let's do it. And then it was pretty cool because I went up there, I pitched, and then I said, if you go to neuroflowlive.com right now, you'll see my stress score streaming in real time. Everybody laughed, and we got a huge spike on the web traffic, and sure enough, it was working, and we ended up winning that competition, which was really exciting.
That's a great story. I mean, there's so many parts to that. The chutzpah or balls or whatever you want to call it to do that right and not play it safe, knowing that it would be really embarrassing if it failed, and probably the fact that you took that gamble probably helped you win. I'm reading between the lines here, but it had that dramatic effect. That's cool. Did that how'd you get into that? Is it just an application process or yeah?
Yeah, I forget how I originally found it. We had this knack. So we started Neuroflow in 2016 in the second half of my first year of business school. And so for the first 15 months of the company, we were just students still. And we had this knack for using that to our benefit to find free money and resources. I forget how many exactly, but we won $150,000 of cash, non-dilutive capital through business plan competitions and grants and stuff like that, all in those 12 months, which basically, I guess that was the pre-seed before the investors, which were great because we didn't give up any equity or anything for that money. And if I remember correctly, the South by Southwest Accelerator was one of those competitions that I found while looking for, ways to get our brand out there and get free money and so forth.
What was which one did you win that money at? Just out of curiosity, because I kind of did that same business plan competition circuit with I didn't ever win though, or I think I won once or something. Anyway, yeah.
Most of them were local, like regional or at Penn, University of Pennsylvania, and most of them weren't at Wharton. It was Penn wide. So you would, Adam was in his PhD program to his bioengineering PhD program. So we kind of had access across the school there, or local in Philadelphia. I remember we did one. I didn't do this one. Adam went to present at the Tiger Launch competition, which we made it to the finals, and that was up in Princeton. And Adam is a few years younger than me, but he's a PhD student, maybe in his late 20s at the time. And for the Tiger Launch, they bring you up to Princeton and they room you with a undergrad Princeton student. So he's sleeping on the floor in a dorm room the night before the presentation. He's like, if this isn't startup life, I don't know what is.
Right, yeah. That's fun. I tell you, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would in a heartbeat. I think we did business plan competitions in we did an elevator pitch, like a true elevator pitch competition in North Carolina. We did some MBA jungle thing in Manhattan, which was really ritzy. We did a pitch competition down in New Orleans, which was a lot of super old genteel, southern investors, really, warm hospitality, which was super fun. And then I think we did one in LA too. It was so much fun going to all these places, and you're sort of treated really well, except for I guess sleeping on the floor of the dorm. But that was so much fun. Good time. So
for sure.
And the other one I was going to ask you about is Alumni Ventures Group. They're kind of a different type of investor. What can you tell me about raising money from them?
Yeah, they're an interesting group. So they have subsidiaries that represent alumni of the schools that are part of the venture group. So we were at Wharton and Penn. So Penn's Alumni Venture subsidiary is Chestnut Street Ventures. And Chestnut Street Ventures, wraps up into the Alumni Ventures Group. And I had met Gail Ball at the time, who was the managing partner at Chestnut Street Ventures, through the investor circuit in Philadelphia. I think she may have been a judge on one or two of those business plan competitions in the area. And so we got to know her throughout the process, and Gail was awesome. She provided so much free advice and consulting throughout the process. And she would always say, look, we can't invest in you because you're too early, and two, we don't lead rounds. Part of the AVG model is they don't lead. If it is now, then it's changed. But at the time they weren't leading. And I said thank you, obviously, and continued to pick her brain, and never kind of left her, made sure that I didn't leave somewhere in her mind to think about us. And so in the course of, once we got that lead investor, Wayne, then I reached back out and said, we have a term sheet. I know we're still early, but we're making a lot of progress. We've met a lot of our milestones. And she said, like, maybe we should take a look at this. And they ended up, I think, seeing our bigger vision and seeing maybe we were still early, but the amount of growth that we had with no resources and the traction and the milestones we were hitting, I think made a compelling enough case where they said it's worth a shot. So they invested in both of our seed rounds.
What was her name?
Her name is Gail Ball. She's not at the firm anymore. She's doing other investor type things. I'm not sure exactly where right now, but Chestnut Street Ventures is the group.
Maybe touch on that, like tips for two things, because you mentioned some of the folks that said no to you came back in later rounds. Also, when you're encountering folks that are like followers, like Alumni Ventures, who don't want to lead, what are your best tips or tactics for keeping these people engaged so that when you get a term sheet or you get a lead, they come back around? Did you do anything specific?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, if you're that early stage like you didn't have enough resources to buy a CRM or customer relationship management software, but Excel is your best friend. So I kept a list and track of every investor I talked to. I had a one column that had the last date I had a touch point with them. And I, had a rule where I could color code those cells. And so if the date fell like further than a month away from the current date, it would turn red. So it would be like a forcing function for, oh, wow, I need to reach out to that person. And I'd also then keep fairly thorough notes on every investor. Specifically, the notes always had who their current investments were, what stage they invested in, if I had any commonality points with them in terms of like other fellow alumni or common touch points, friends, that sort of thing. And then I had another column for feedback. And if they gave me any, basically the why they said no, that was the most important reason or the most important column. So sometimes they say no because, I think the first lesson for me was you can't take no's personally. I mean, it's just part of the game. It's like, in baseball, if you hit 3 out of 10, you're a Hall of Famer. In investment world, if you hit 1 out of 10, you're good to go. So the failing 9 times is normal. And so with every no, we were told a specific reason. If they didn't give me a reason, I would make sure to ask and really just, dig into that. And I was given some advice that said investors don't invest in dots, they invest in lines. Mm-hmm. Every interaction with you is a dot on their graph. And they connect those dots, they want to see an upward trajectory. So I just made sure to be very deliberate with giving them any piece of news I had that I thought was good news. I would put a little bit more polish on it, make it sound like great news, and then send it off to them. Hey, we just won this competition. Did you see this article about us? I just wrote this blog post. And I think one thing led to another, and people were like, 1, I know you're not going to quit. 2, this isn't just a school project. 3, I think now you're going to figure it out. 4, maybe they had something personal in their lives go on that connected them with our mission. Maybe they had a bout of depression, or they had a family member that was going through anxiety that they're like, now I see the need myself. Or you don't know exactly what happens, but that's why you have to keep on top of them. And then before you know it, it's funny, something kind of clicks. And then when you know that you're making an impact, when they reach back out to you to say, are you fundraising again? Because I'd love to be a part of it.
Yeah, those are great tips. I like it. I like the methodology and the strategery of that all. So
yeah,
cool. I won't keep you too much longer. Let's just talk about the most recent round. I guess Series A, any anecdotes there? Who led that round? Was it a hunt for new investors or a lot of folks you've been talking to for years or what? Tell us the story.
Yeah, well, going back to that list of the 141 no's and then the dozen or so yeses that we had, I kept that list and the notes and everything. And part of the notes were they don't, and the no's of why they didn't invest were because they don't invest in seed rounds, but they invest in Series A rounds. So bingo, that's my first list I go to for the Series A. I know that they already know me. I know them to an extent. I've kept in touch with them over the last year or so. So it was like, they weren't hearing from me for the first time. And so I'd reach out to them. give them a really exciting update about what we've been doing and that we're thinking about going to raise our next round, and to be just very deliberate about what we were asking for and what the goal of that money was.
Mm-hmm.
So our seed round, we had X, Y, and Z goals. We met them. Now our next goals are, milestone 1, 2, and 3, and we need $7.5 million to accomplish those that get us to the next level. And so once you felt like you had that story intact, then you had to find the targets to reach out to. And that was, I would like to say that it gets easier, but I think that it almost got harder in a way, because at that point, you weren't an unproven commodity that had to just convince them that you were able to do it. Mm-hmm. At that point, you had to have some track record to show that, no, see, I was able to do it, what I said I could do. So it was about a 6-month process again.
Mm-hmm.
Talked to a lot of people, and Builders VC ended up leading the round because they really wanted to get into the behavioral health space. And Mark Goldstein was the partner that led that round. And similar to why Wayne invested in terms of liking our thesis about being a B2B platform, Mark loved that aspect of it. He said, you're augmenting clinical workflow. You're not trying to invent a new workflow. You are supercharging the existing workflow, coming into being a resource. And the catch is that there's mental health protocols that work really well. So there's no point in changing that too much, rather being a support tool for that. And Mark really liked that. The Builders team is a phenomenal team that's been super supportive over the last year. And so they came in for the majority of the round, but most of our existing investors came in to re-up their initial investments.
Great. Any size of, or you mentioned 140 names for that seed round. How many names do you think for Series A? What was the size of your funnel?
Probably about the same, and that's 140 with some sort of interaction, whether that was in a phone call or a video call or in-person meeting. There's a lot more that we just had on our target list that maybe they didn't get back to us or we didn't get to reach out to them. But the Series A round wasn't as traumatic as my seed round, so I don't remember the exact number, but something around there.
Great. All right, I'll let you go. And one more question. Any other tips we haven't covered, or as I always like to ask, advice you would give your younger self if you were doing this all over again?
Oh man. I think that there's a common misconception that perseverance and not giving up means to be decisive in your idea and vision moving forward. I think I would tell myself to be less tied to the exact idea and vision and be more tied to solving the problem, and be okay with changing more quicker along the way. I mean, I think we've adjusted and we've done our fair share of pivoting and iterating to get to where we are today. But I think we could have done that if I'm being critical and self-reflective. We could have done those switches quicker and gotten to where we are today quicker if we had that foresight to make that change. So don't give up, but don't give up on solving the problem. It's okay to give up on a particular idea and how you're trying to solve that problem.
Yeah, sure. That's good. I like that. All right, I will let you go. If people want to learn more, your website is Neuroflow Solutions.
We took off the solution last year, so it's just, let me see if this, just neuroflow.com, neuroflow.com.
Great. Anything you want to plug or promote, open job recs? It sounds like consumers can't go straight up to sign up for this app, but anything you want to kind of push?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're hiring right now. We're in fast growth mode. We went from 19 employees in September of last year to 48 currently. And we're hiring for partnerships roles, sales roles, engineering across the spectrum, iOS, Android, and backend. The consumers can't sign up for the app, but your doctors certainly can. So I'd ask your physicians or your the healthcare providers that you see, if they know about Neuroflow and you'd like to try it out. And then lastly, and nothing to do with Neuroflow, but just mental health in general, it's a tough time out there. So don't be afraid of reaching out. If you know somebody that you think is having a tough time, reach out to them, just ask how they're doing. I guarantee you asking them how they're doing isn't going to make their day worse. So there are resources out there. So don't be, it's not a sign of weakness, and it's the opposite. It's a sign of strength to reach out.
That's good closing words. All right, Chris, thank you so much. Congratulations. Sounds like a pretty important and valuable service you're providing. So we'll catch you after the Series B, all right?
Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.